in Victoria for children and young people. All of our work is centred on children and young people, obviously, at Berry Street, and so that's something really important for us to acknowledge. And I think it'd be really great to know where other folks are coming in from. So even if you just want to put in the chat, like which traditional lands you're coming from, and if you don't know, Google it and chuck it in the chat box, because I'd love to see where everyone's coming from. And can everyone see my slides okay? Keira, can you, and Michael, can you see them? Yep, beauty. So before we kick off, I'll be mostly in the background today, and Keira and Michael will be talking a lot after this. But I thought it'd be important just to give you a little bit of an introduction to who YChange actually is. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of us, but you probably haven't heard us talk about ourselves, so that feels important. So essentially, YChange formed many, many years ago. It's essentially a 13 year in the making model at Berry Street, and we always bring in Lauren Oliver, who was the first senior advisor for youth engagement at Berry Street, who worked very hard to get this model up and running. In 2013, essentially, there was a conference that was actually through YACVIC, the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria, and it was called Connect 4, and it was talking about how do we partner better with young people experiencing disadvantage. And I was actually in the crowd. I was a volunteer with YACVIC at that time, and Lauren had gotten together a group of young people from across the sector, including the Mirabelle Foundation and YSAS, and they delivered this really powerful presentation to the youth minister at the time. His name was Ryan Smith. And essentially what they were saying was, you have to stop talking about us without partnering with us to actually affect systems change. And at the time, Crystal Moon, who was the first project officer at YChange, she was one of the founding members, said this really powerful quote, which was, "We know where the cracks are because we fell through them." And that's definitely something that still echoes throughout our work. We take very seriously our founders and really like passing the baton on, because so much energy and sacrifice and love and care has gone into this model, and it's something we're really proud of. So Berry Street, we call ourselves a social and systemic change platform. We don't call ourselves a program on purpose, and that's because we don't want the young lived experience consultants to be seen as clients, because they're not clients, they're our peers. Young people are aged 18 to 30, and they come to us with a lived experience of deep socioeconomic marginalisation and disadvantage. And so some of those lived experiences include family violence, homelessness, mental illness, the criminal justice system, etc., etc. And we have sort of a training and employment model. So it's one of the rare models where young people are actually hired as casual consultants with Berry Street as paid staff. And their title is lived experience consultant, and they're seen just the same as everyone else in the organisation. And essentially what we're trying to do is support the group of young people to adapt the skills they've already learnt through their lived experience as a professionalised skill set. For us, it's not enough to just have a story of trauma, even though storytelling is incredibly important and very powerful. We want to go that next step, which is using the experience, the lived experience, to then translate it into a professionalised toolkit so they can do things like advocacy, sit on government bodies, work on co-design projects in Berry Street, and actually become advisors in their own right. So we work for many, many years alongside them to do that. We aim to do two key things. The first is that we want to challenge and change society's perception of young people experiencing disadvantage as somehow limited. We don't believe they're limited. We believe that they don't have access to the resources that they need, so they're resource limited. And we also want to firmly place young people with lived experience of disadvantage at decision-making, policy-making, and change-making tables, because we don't believe that they're there enough. And more often than not, when we have young people who do end up in these places, they are people with a lot of class privilege. And so we're very, very passionate about having young people who are the most affected at the table. And just really quickly, before I hand over to Keira to talk a little bit about who we are, it just feels important to talk about how we think. So this is the iceberg model of systems thinking is something we use a lot. I won't bore you from talking about the whole thing, but essentially you've probably heard of sort of iceberg models before because they're used all over the place, sorry, but this one's really cool. And essentially what YChange are trying to do is create some space and time to think about how we think about young people. So the first three top layers are what we're constantly focusing on in the sector, sort of the patterns of behaviour, the systems and structures and policies. But what we think we don't do enough of is thinking about our mental models. So the values, assumptions and beliefs that shape all of our systems, and how the ways we actually believe and think about young people are influencing everything that we're doing in this sector. So we're really trying to have some deeper conversations about that. And then I'll just pass over to Keira, but I think Kira's already got something to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think what's good to mention with the iceberg model as well is people are quite comfortable seeing young people at the top, like in the events, in public forums, in those public spaces, but not really comfortable sitting with young people at like exploring those mental models and the culture shifts. So yeah, I think I'd just like to add that.
Thanks, Keira. And this is your quote.
Yeah, so a lot of the time workers within organisations will set up services and programs and groups for young people. And then when young people who've been through a lot don't rock up, we get labelled as hard to reach or not engaged. But it's just a bunch of professionals in a room wondering what young people need and how best to support us without us even being there or asking us. And it may not be something that's safe or accessible, or may not be something that we even need or want. And yeah, you miss out a lot when you don't include the ones who have lived experience. So we can tell you what works, what doesn't, and where it's also been really damaging. So we already know that we have value, and it's up to other people to catch up on that.
Thanks, Keira. And so just before we jump in now, I'll just give a bit of an introduction to the session. So thank you everybody for logging on today. It's a tough time. We're really conscious of that. It's, lockdown 6.0 for Melbourners, and, it's just sort of wearing on. So we really appreciate you being here today. We thought it was really, so Sam came to us and said he'd really love to hear from Keira, particularly Keira and Michael, about how lived experience has influenced Berry Street and how Berry Street is kind of holding this incubator for us to keep doing the amazing work that we're doing and just making some of our process visible. So we've got Michael Perusco, who's our CEO, who's really wonderfully joining us today. And it's just a conversation for you to hear a little bit about some of our inner processes and what's been happening behind the scenes, because it is actually quite rare for lived experience to influence an organisation and its culture, I think, in the way it has at Berry Street, and that's something we're extremely proud of. So we'll be, there's two sort of bits. The first is that Keira will be reflecting on a series of questions, and then Michael will be reflecting on a series of questions as well. And then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end if anyone else has anything else to say. But please feel free to put Q&As in the chat box as well, because I'll be answering these as these two talk. But before we jump in, Michael and Keira, was there anything else you wanted to say before we jump into everything? No? Okay, let's go. So for Keira, here's your list of questions. So Keira has some reflections to go through. These were the questions that YACVIC posed to us to reflect on behalf of everybody else, in the hopes that you might be able to learn from our process. So I'll hand it over to Keira.
Thanks, Morgan. So I first started with YChange when I was 17. And that was when Michael first started with Berry Street as a CEO, and he was going around and meeting all the teams. So when we met with Michael, he didn't, like, from what I got from him, he didn't really understand what YChange was, and had just come into Berry Street and been involved in a lot of adult community services organisations. And I remember Michael talking about an open door policy. So after he met with our team, I asked Lauren Oliver, who Morgan was talking about before, if she thought that Michael would be open to mentoring me. And she said, yeah, he might be. So I decided to walk out straight away and ask him, which I don't think Lauren was expecting. And I think she was a bit surprised by that. And when I approached Michael, I asked if he would mentor me. And I think he was a bit shocked as well. And I very intentionally wanted an opportunity to partner with Michael. So I had that conversation with him, and he was like, oh yeah, I think that would be okay. We'll just have to ask, a few more people. And I wrote a letter requesting a mentorship with Michael and kind of talked through what I would want out of the opportunity, and also wanted to hear if Michael wanted anything out of the opportunity as well. And I think why I wanted to approach Michael is because we had a common interest. So he had been working in the homelessness organisations before and been a CEO of a couple of different homelessness organisations, and I had a lived experience of homelessness, as well as I really want to become a CEO and start my own organisation. So I thought that would be a good opportunity for me to learn from Michael and learn about his journey and his path and how he got to become a CEO and what qualifications he had. So I pulled, after a bit of back and forth for quite a long time, it finally got the go ahead, and I put together all the agendas for the meetings, including like the meeting objectives, and learnt, was Googling frantically like how to create an agenda and what different mentorships would look like in the past, so I could learn about how to do it, because this is something that I hadn't done before either. So yeah, I sent the agendas to Michael before each meeting and researched about Michael and about different CEOs, like how many CEOs were women and come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I was really prepared, because I was really clear that I didn't want to waste his time, and wanted this to be something that we could both get a lot out of. And I think, through that was kind of, so the question for, was there something that sparked the shift? I feel like doing the mentorship with Michael was a way, like from my perspective, Michael hearing directly about the work of YChange, and what we were doing, and learning about like me as well, and learning about my story and kind of how I came to Berry Street and to YChange, and then getting a better understanding of YChange and the work that we do from a lived experience perspective. And also, I think me sharing with Michael as well how we were really seen externally, like at the kind of leading youth participation, but internally we weren't, being involved as much. So kind of bringing that to Michael. And then I think the other thing that sparked the shift was our policy submission for the Royal Commission into Victorians' mental health system. So this was going on at the same time as a mentorship with Michael, and myself and another YChanger got invited to the board to speak about it. And I had written a poem for the YChange, for the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. So I'd written a poem, and I think reading that, we had one of the board members actually say that had changed his mind, and he'd been working in the mental health system for, his whole life, and to hear from young people with lived experience changed his mind. And I think that had a big impact as well. Morgan, was there anything else you wanted to add to that question?
Which was the question, Dale? Was it
just the first question?
This is, and Michael will reflect on this too, but when we were prepping for this, we were talking about how systems change is so often a collection of things that collide together and explode, right? It's not often things that you can predict. And so I think what was happening at the time is that Michael was learning about YChange through Keira, and, was developing this, working relationship and making sense of what we were doing and really understanding lived experience. And then at the same time, we also published our first policy submission, which was the Royal Commission response, and we called that Curing the Sickness of the System, which was pretty substantial. And we were all pretty proud of it. And that made a big splash at Berry Street. There was a lot of excitement. And I think it was two things. It wasn't just what we were responding to in the mental health service system. It was also us making YChange's methodology quite visible to the organisation in a way we hadn't before. And this is the difficult thing, is when you're starting up something like YChange, a lot of it is inside a bubble, and you all know it, and you think that everyone else knows it, but actually you haven't communicated it yet. And I don't think we'd done that just yet, because that just wasn't where we were at. So once I came on board, we really started to think about, well, how do we want to communicate about what we're doing so other people can learn about all of the internal stuff inside of that bubble that we already knew. So I think it was those two things. Obviously, the power of Keira because she is such a force, and working with Michael, but then also making what we were doing visible through the submission, and then being invited to the board and seeing the reaction of the board. So I think, you know, those two things were pretty unique and great. Is that helpful, Keira?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just want to thank everyone as well for being patient with me. Like, the lockdown is having a big impact on a lot of young people. So yeah, thanks for the time today. I think I really intentionally wanted to learn from Michael about what it even was, what a CEO even did, because I wasn't even sure. And we did have to try a lot of tactics, because I didn't know that you weren't just meant to go up and talk to a CEO. Like, you had to talk to someone else, who talked to someone else, who talked to someone else, and there was like a bit of a hierarchy. So because I just went up and asked Michael, because I wasn't sure about all those kind of organizational things that people working in the sector already know. So there was a fair bit of back and forth, and I was probably a bit confused about why it was taking so long. But I was excited once, you know, we were able to get going and start having those conversations. And there was a few bumps in the road, just with me not understanding the dynamics of a CEO staff relationship, and also not really knowing about organizational policies and stuff like that. And I was also like really worried about not being good enough and saying the wrong thing. And it was really difficult for me. I had to work through a lot of like internal barriers that I felt, and feelings of self-doubt, and feeling like I was an imposter, and like I wasn't, a lot of feelings of shame as well, I think, that I had to work through. And I think recommendations that I would have for others, it feels weird me being a young person and being like, here's what I recommend, but just doing it, like let's stop letting that inner doubt stop you, and seeing a leader in your organization who you want to have a relationship with, and being intentional about why. And being prepared and doing your homework and research. And I think what also helped me was having a support person. So having Morgan and Lauren as well at the time, to be able to debrief with afterwards and say, oh, I said this, and I wish I said this, or I wish I said something else. And also feeling like I want to kind of prove myself as well, and prove why young people with lived experience should be talking to people in positions of power and having these kind of relationships. So I think moving through your own internal barriers and just going through it. I think as well, like, you know, as adults and people who've been working in the sector a lot, people can grow a bit like cynical and lose a bit of optimism. And I think allowing young people to challenge the way things have always been done, and instead of saying, oh, well, this is the way we've always doing it, so we've got to do it this way, letting young people challenge you and doing it different ways, and using your imagination as well. So I think I'll pass over to you, Morgan.
Yeah, so I think just thanks so much, Keira, but just finishing up on that point, you know, something I think we really underestimate is the power of imagination in our sector and what's possible. And I think we say all the time, oh, young people are so inspiring and they challenge us and la la la. But actually, when you think about it, it's really hard to be challenged in that way. And I think this is a really great example of what happens when young people kind of kick your ass and say, what if we could do something really different here and take it seriously? So much of this, when we talk about like what are our recommendations, and you'll hear from Michael in a minute, some of this is just be a bit more open to something being different, and trusting that that could happen in your organization as well when you find the right relationship. I think we all grow really cynical, oh, that can't happen, and oh, that's too hard, and there's all these sorts of things. But something that YChange constantly show me is that it's building these deep and meaningful relationships across allyship, across an organization, and just watching as that flourishes, and seeing how that influences an organization. And that does take a lot of work, and it is a commitment, but it's something I think we really underestimate in ways cultures change. So thanks so much, Keira. And I will now hand over to Michael.
Thanks, Morgan. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today. For me, it's Wurundjeri land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today and to follow Keira. And I'm pleased because it gives us the opportunity, or it gives me the opportunity, to reflect on how we got to where we got to. And I think in a relatively short period of time, kind of 2.5 years-ish, we've gone from having a group of lived experience consultants who were doing some really good work outside the organisation to a group of lived experience consultants who are continuing that work externally, but also have many tentacles throughout the organisation and are really influencing the way in which we're developing. So in terms of the question, what was my previous thinking? Of lived experience, in previous roles, worked hard to establish service user advisory groups or tenant advisory groups. So it was always something on my mind, but I think having YChanges as employees and having them as lived experience consultants who are colleagues was quite different. And when I came to Berry Street, I kind of got it, but didn't really. And I think Keira was spot on when she made the observation that I didn't really know what to make of YChange. They were a reasonably autonomous group within the organisation, and that would include media or other work that they were doing. And I got to say, when I first came on board, I'm like, holy dooly, really? The media side of things is pretty controlled, or even the external advocacy, but there was a sense of independence and a sense of YChange being a part of the organisation, but also having a sense of autonomy. And all I can say is that confused me and raised more questions than answers. I think what was the circumstances that led to my shift of understanding? It was very much the mentoring relationship that I had with Keira. When Keira raised it, so Keira was being quite polite in terms of what she was saying. It took a bit of time to organise. So when Keira first raised it, I'm like, I'm not sure about this. Like, what does she want to get out of it? Will I be able to offer what she wants to get out of it? What about some boundaries? What about the way? What's the purpose? Where is this going to end up? And that ended up in forcing Keira to go through a really bureaucratic process to get to the point where it actually happened, which I'm really embarrassed about now, but that was the reality. Really forced Keira to go through the layers to kind of get to me, if you like, and make sure everyone gave it the tick. And as I said, that is really embarrassing. I think, from my perspective, what the of the mentorship, it quickly evolved into a co-mentoring relationship, where I certainly felt like I was getting a lot out of it. Keira was obviously smart and motivated, and also had a very thoughtful perspective about the role of lived experience, and a really nuanced understanding about the advice that she provides the organisation, and what happens with that advice. Like sometimes it's taken on board, sometimes it's not taken on board. She came to the meetings really prepared, had a really clear idea of about what she wanted to get out of them. And when I asked her opinion about aspects of Berry Street, I got really candid and really thoughtful responses, which really made me think differently about Berry Street. And it was only through the sessions with Keira that I got a sense of the potential of YChange. It reinforced internally, the potential internally, and it made me excited more. It made me more excited about what they could do externally, and it made me realize we had this amazing resource at our fingertips, which we, you know, that I wanted everyone to have the conversation that I had with Keira, so that they could benefit from really understanding what YChange can offer. And I'm really pleased to say that, you know, over the time, that understanding has built up across the organisation. Was it a single light bulb moment? It actually was. In the last one of the last sessions with Keira, you know, I'd asked her to prepare a list of things, a list of her view on certain things at Berry Street, and I remember, you know, quite clearly just thinking, my God, we've got to benefit from this. You know, from this expertise. And what that led to is a much closer working relationship between myself and YChange, and a much more active role for YChange right across the organisation. And I'd say, what advice do you have for others trying to change culture? You know, the first thing I'd say is persistence. Like, unfortunately, what I did when Keira approached me was put up a whole lot of barriers. I wasn't thinking about them as barriers at the point. I was thinking I just want to get comfortable with this thing. But at the end of the day, what I did was put up barriers, and Keira persisted. And if Keira didn't persist, we wouldn't be here talking today. I think the other thing I'd say is be confident that adding lived experience to your organisation will have a great benefit. So when you're advocating for it, know that it's going to produce great results, and be confident in that. And I hope that gives you more confidence to advocate for it. And I think the third thing I'd say is, you know, there are always people in an organisation who are advocating for the status quo. You're always going to get that, and that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they're at a particular point in the change cycle, and you got to push through that. So I think they're the main things I wanted to share.
Thanks so much, Michael. We've had quite a few comments coming through, so I might just direct them your way. Molly says, I'm curious from Michael's perspective, what have you learned from Keira in regards to engaging directly with young people? Have you discovered any biases?
I think what I've learned from Keira is the value that lived experience can play in different forums, and that is a perspective that is required at the table. And it doesn't mean that it's the most important perspective, but it's a perspective that has to be there. And I think that is what Keira made me realise.
And thanks, Michael. And just one more from Molly. how have you found you have grown as a leader because of the mentoring relationship? I think you've touched on it a bit already, but if you've got anything else to add.
Yeah, I think I hope I have. I certainly think of lived experience much more when we're talking about doing things differently at Berry Street, or developing, or whether it's we're organising a forum. It's like, okay, we need lived experience on the forum. It's made me appreciate the as I've said a number of times, the value of lived experience and what it has to offer.
And another question for you, Michael.
Yes.
So Sophia from Keira Gateway, after your experience, Michael, do you have advice for how workers trying to get advisory groups off the ground can approach executives about the value of listening and mentorships?
Well, I think, I think I touched on that. I think be confident when you're approaching them that you're approaching them about something that's worthwhile. I think getting the young people involved in doing that directly. I mean, Keira did it off her own bat, and will no doubt become a CEO of an organisation, I'm sure. But I'd get young people involved, and I think it's going to happen slowly too, I think, is the other thing. I think it's not going to happen straight away. Like even me with the light bulb moment, it still took a while to get things in place and to create the change within the organisation, and to get more leaders across the organisation engaged.
Thanks, Michael. Did anyone else have any other reflections or anything? There's some really great comments in the chats. Thanks, everyone. And I think there's been a lot of people saying how unique this is. And I think that's exactly why I think it's so important to get this story out there, because this is a really unique, I think, study and example of what happens when systems change and what it means to have someone like Michael, also our director, Tom, who's in the chat as well on the call, like having these levels of allies, like really meaningful, deep allies in an organization that fight to have this work. And this is often where we see organizations really fall down, because it's all happening on the ground, but they're having trouble actually influencing up top. Whereas we're extremely lucky in that we have this incredible group, including Keira, and then we also have very firm support from the board down. And that's where you really start to see things shift. Another question here, I think it's for you, Keira. So from Lake, I'd love to throw a question back to Keira if I can. There's been some talk around persistence, and yours is to be admired, but what do you think we can do to mitigate the barriers you faced to achieving this level of partnership and prevent other young people like you from having to persist through these obstacles in the future? So do you feel like there's anything that could have happened for it to have been a little less painful for you, I suppose, is the question.
Can I just have a little bit of time to think about that? Maybe if you want to reflect on it first,
yeah, of course.
And then I can go afterwards.
I'm going to reflect on this. I always have things to say, so please don't think that I'm like talking on behalf of Keira. I'm not. But there was something really important about that process. Even though it was painful, especially for Keira, Keira has reflected to me and Michael how much she grew throughout understanding how an organization works. So I don't know, of course we always have to think about doing harm too, right? That wasn't an experience where Keira was harmed, but it was uncomfortable and it was clunky, right? So at YChange, we're always saying that we learn so much through the uncomfortability of everything. The danger is when we get to harmfulness, right? Which I think we do really well. We mitigate that really well at Berry Street. So I don't and Keira will obviously reflect on this much better than I will because it was her experience, but there was so much that both Michael and Keira learnt through just having to get through that clunkiness, and so much Keira learnt about how organisations function, and what that meant for her and her systems change brain. So from a systems perspective, I think it was actually really useful. But Keira, was there anything, I don't want to put words in your mouth, mate. So yeah, do you want to reflect? Have you got some words yet?
Yeah, I have words. My cat has come to join us today's conversation. But yeah, I think there was, yeah, it wasn't harm. I think it was a really big learning experience, and something that I hadn't, from not having a job to suddenly stepping into a really big organization, it can be really scary. And there was a time after I had a conversation with Michael, and I was like, oh, why did I say that? I said something so stupid and had all those self-doubt thoughts. And I went and I sat under the table at Berry Street, and I was just like, yeah, feeling really shitty about myself. And Lauren came and she sat with me. And I think that that's the biggest thing we do in YChange. It's sat together. It's never like I'm going through this by myself. It's like, we'll do this together. So we'll sit down together, we'll have a conversation. And through me writing the letter, Lauren was there writing it with me, and teaching me how to do the agendas as well. I think that together is so important to me. It's never like, here, this is your idea, I'll give this to you, I'll tell you what to do, and then you go off and do it. It's like, let's sit down and let's do it together and let's work it out together. So I think that is a really big thing for me that makes the ride easier.
Yeah. You know, that's something we're really passionate about at YChange. It's we cannot remove being uncomfortable. And if we're doing systems change, it's very uncomfortable. And so I think that goes back into, you know, what does it mean to have the right scaffolding and infrastructure so we can just support young people through doing really difficult things. You can't remove the difficulty, and actually to do that actually takes away opportunities for learning. It's that they have people with them walking through it together. So I'm just going to pick up on Dan's great comment. It is also the fact that sometimes advocacy is painful, awkward, uncomfortable. That change isn't easy. But is it that it's more important to have systems in place to manage potential harm than just make the ride easier? That's exactly right. We can't remove all of the factors that are going to feel uncomfortable for young people. What we can do is put cushioning around that and support systems around that. So we walk through it together and we make sense of it together. And that's where I think for us, we see such extreme growth with the team over so many years, is because we allow them to go through really real experiences with us. But Keira, I think you want to say more words.
Yeah, more words. I think it showed me how to deal with those emotions as well, like in a professional context. So how to kind of manage emotions, and also like how to ask for help. And yeah, I think that like doing it, I learned so much. Like I honestly did learn so much, and I would do it again. So yeah, and we are doing it again with the board mentoring. So YChange lived experience consultants are now working with the board to do exchange mentoring. So yeah, I think that's really exciting. We also have another question from Dan, who I want to go back to.
We have many.
If you want to talk a bit more about the importance of time within all this. And I think for me, like something that me and Lauren used to talk about, it's like it was the right time for me. So I think it's important, like, you know, we talk about like young people going in crisis and stuff like that. And for me, when I first started with YChange, I wasn't in crisis, and I felt really ready. Like I was at a time in my life when I was like, oh, I don't know what to do now. Like I want to, you know, start working, but I never really thought about like having a job or what I wanted my goals to be in my life. So I didn't really have the time and space to think about that. So I think when I first stepped into YChange, having that, it was like the right time for me. It wasn't like I was getting pushed into anything. It was, it felt really right for me, and it felt like I was at a time in my life where I could I wasn't going through so much that I could actually have that time to learn and that space to process and reflect on what I've been through to then share that with others. So I think from my perspective as a young person with lived experience, it was that kind of right time. And that doesn't mean that, you know, we started talking about like living experiences and how it's not lived experience doesn't mean that what we've been through is in the past. Like we may still be going through things and managing things, but yeah, I think it's all about timing and asking young people like when works for them, and it may change as well.
Thanks, Keira. There's a question I'm going to bring up for Michael to reflect on in a minute, but I can see a lot of people asking about what is it that we're doing to give young people and sharing their stories and experiences. And thanks, Luke, for saying a bit more about what you meant with your question. Yeah, so there's so many things that we do at YChange. It's a pretty unique sort of model. So obviously at the very core of it is the youth exchange principle, which is that it's deep reciprocity and it's developing very deep relationships over many, many years. So everything is guided by the young people, and this is a very unique model. And you know, we have I think what's so great about Berry Street is they understand that we need space and time because that's the way that we function. So when the young people are coming to us, and they'd say this too, they've come from being extraordinarily harmed by institutions. And so we don't take for granted that gaining their trust takes time, and it takes consistency, and everything needs to be guided by them. So informed consent for us is at the very core of everything we do. Trauma-informed practice is part of everything we do at YChange. But also I think in some really practical senses. So we do debriefing and pre-briefing before and after every single thing we do. So this is something that people don't often see this under the iceberg of our practice, but like we've already met, we've gone through the questions, we talk through what the challenges are, we talk through, are there any potential areas where you feel like that might be a bit risky to say anything about your story? How do we want to mitigate that? And then after every event, such as this one, we'll jump on and say, how did that go? What did you learn? What might you do differently next time? What did you really like about that? And we do that all the time, and that's where so much of the learning comes from in our model. So in terms of what we do to mitigate, it's those sorts of things that we work alongside every day, all day together. And we're building those relationships and we're checking in with each other. So something I'm often doing and our team's often doing, how are you, where are you at today? I know we've got this meeting, are you still feeling up to it? Like, especially right now with everything going on in the world, you know, we're doing some pretty deep work in family violence, for example, and that's just bringing up a hell of a lot for people at the moment in the team. So then it's up to me to go to our partners and go to people in Berry Street and educate them about, hey, these are the most affected young people in the community. So although they want to get things done and they want to make sure everything's on time, we need to make sure we're never going into that re-traumatization area, and that's up to us to come around them and have like a bit of a shield of support. So because really our deadlines are more arbitrary than their well-being, so it's actually prioritizing that in practice. And then one other question I'll just get, I think Greco's just come back on and I'm conscious we're just going way over time, but Michael, there's one question here I think would be great for you to reflect on from Shelby. How do you navigate any competing priorities of the organisation and the young advisory members or the young lived experience consultants? So competing priorities of organisations versus what lived experience think are the priorities.
I think that's a conversation. So I think I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I can't give you a specific, I don't think I can give you a specific example, but I think it is about recognising that the YChange team are up for a discussion and have an approach which is sophisticated to the point where they understand they're not going to get everything that, or all of their advice is not going to be taken on board. It's just impossible at times. So I think that's less of an issue than you might think. And I, because of the relationship that I have with YChange, I feel really comfortable having those conversations. Not that they're required particularly often, I might say. I think for the most part, we're on the same page.
Yep. That was really kind. I think Dan was saying I could listen to this all day. I'm hoping to actually write up a bit of a reflection piece based on this with Michael and Keira, and then we could circulate it around and just continue the conversation. So yeah, handing back over to, is it Emily? I just want to say Greco, and then I'm like, that's your surname.
Yes, I do refer to myself as Greco on this because there are so many Emilys, and so it removes confusion. I find it easier. So thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Michael and Keira, the three of you.
Pleasure.
Amazing. Like obviously we have gone well over time, but I made the executive decision that the content was just too good to cut short. And I think like having you here, we really, really just wanted to make the most of the insights that you're able to provide in the story. And, you know, the other things can wait till next time. They're definitely not as important as the lessons that we've learned today. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, just amazing work.